The final members of an audacious drugs plot have been jailed, marking the end of one of modern British crime's most extraordinary conspiracies. It involved helicopters laden with cocaine, a rental home of a Harry Potter film star, and messages to the sky laid out in an orchid. The masterminds were caught after risking dramatic water crossings while navigating the river border of two former Soviet nations, and another after using a speedboat to flee a Thai island. It was an international network led by a Birkenhead gangster and managed from Spain. It was brought down after police stopped a Wirral couple driving through North Yorkshire. 6 years and more than 25 criminal prosecutions later, this is a remarkable story of Lance Kennedy and his downfall. So Kennedy may be from Birkenhead, but he operated from a base in Spain, and his exploits were predominantly focused on the northeast. From his Barcelona hub, he sourced a vast quantity of cocaine largely destined under his management for the streets and towns surrounding Middlesbrough. Getting the Class A drug into the UK without being caught by police, customs or border officials was the biggest problem he faced. However, he came up with a solution. Kennedy's gang hired Dutch pilots to fly helicopters filled with cocaine across the English Channel. The flight paths most commonly used for private journeys were studied and logged, meaning the smuggling runs would take off from Belgium, typically Antwerp, and head to airfields in southeast England, including Wickham and Redhill. Kennedy's UK-based colleagues would then find rural holiday homes beneath those flight paths and rent them, in one case, for months at a time. The helicopters would then be able to land at those secluded countryside spots, be unloaded, and minutes later return to complete the scheduling journey, avoiding suspicion from those monitoring radar because they would not deviate from the flight path they were booked onto. Across 2015 and 2016, Kennedy was linked to 6 flights containing a suspected 500 kilos of cocaine. The wholesale value of the haul was just over £17 million, but it was so pure that police believed it could have been worth up to £350 million once adulterated and sold onto Britain's streets. Don't know where sometimes these cops get these figures from. In one drugs run example, Liverpool Crown Court heard how in late 2015, Matthew Payne, a courier and organiser managed by Kennedy, handed over just under £4,000 to secure Crow Cottage, a holiday home in Kent. Just days before Christmas, a helicopter briefly disappeared from radar near Faversham, a market town in the county. 8 minutes later, it reappeared close to the nearby village of Eastling. Crow Cottage is located just outside that county. At the time of the helicopter flight, mobile phone masts placed Payne and his associate J. Flip-Flop Robinson in the area of the secluded retreat. The prosecutors David Potter and Kyra Badman argued Payne and Robinson had been waiting for the cargo of cocaine to land. Their argument was supported by the suspicions of the estate manager. On the day of the helicopter flight, he had seen a white bedsheet spread out on the ground of an orchard behind the cottage. Weeks later, there was a dispute over the second instalment of rent, which ultimately led to the booking being cancelled. Payne told the owners he would send his brother-in-law to collect children's clothes and toys left at the property. Days later, the estate manager let in 2 men with Liverpool accents to pick them up. He watched them pull 2 whole loads from a cupboard under the stairs. The bags were so heavy, the men had to drag them to the vehicle. Then they left without any of the children's belongings they were supposedly sent to pick up. Prosecutors said the men were in fact removing the remaining cocaine dropped off by the helicopter. Another holiday home used by the gang was in Dover. The property had a garden that overlooks the channel and crumbles into the White Cliffs of Dover. One of Kennedy's highest ranking subordinates, Paris Newcomb, booked the property in April 2016. It was around this trip that detectives uncovered a bizarre chain of events in which Kennedy's key contact, Robert Stewart, and his driver and lookout, David Campbell, repeatedly travelled the length of England. In one day, they drove from Wirral to Teeside, then to Kent, staying overnight in Ashford before driving to the cottage, and then the next day, returning to Wirral via Ashford. The next day, they drove back to Dover. Campbell would later tell police that he and Stewart were actually on a trip to Euro Disney in France, which they pulled out of before they reached Dover. That claim was undermined by texts obtained by officers. While Stewart and Campbell were travelling, another one of the conspirators, Conor Fraser Clark, was texting his wife Alison from the Dover cottage. As Stewart and Campbell were returning to the southeast, a helicopter took off from Antwerp at 11:32 a.m. and at 12:17 p.m. Conor texted his wife, I've got to wait till 2 though. Ferry went home last night and I've been asked to wait until he gets back. 32 minutes later, he wrote, chopper is here, 160 bits. So bits is a slang for a kilo, with the prosecutors arguing that the helicopter had therefore been carrying 160 kilos of cocaine. Around 2:20 p.m., Stewart and Campbell arrived in Dover. Just 40 minutes later, they headed back the 300 miles to Birkenhead with the car now laden, the prosecution said, with drugs. So this home in Dover belonged to a BAFTA award-winning actress, Mariam Margolyes, who was also in Harry Potter, and she spoke on a BBC show talking about one day she got a call from the police and they said, "Are you the owner of this property?" And she said, "Yes." "Are you aware that it's been used as a drop for criminals to get rid of their drugs?" She said, "Well, of course I didn't know. What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, people have rented it. They were a gang from Liverpool, I think, and they took my house and they dropped the drugs in the bay, and there was a helicopter that came on the roof. It's a flat roof, and they had cocaine. They had something like £13 million worth of cocaine." And Mariam added, "Well, of course I was horrified because I didn't know. I mean, I don't have anything to do with people that rent it. I just take the money. What was upsetting to me was when it was reported, of course, in the Daily Mail, all of the people online said, 'Oh, she must be in it. She's part of the gang.' They were calling me Miriam Escobar." However, in September 2016, detectives made a crucial breakthrough. Officers identified the Fraser Clarks as potential drug couriers and monitored them on a trip to Newcastle before stopping them on the A19 in Yorkshire. Inside secret compartments in their vehicle was just over £200,000. The couple's Wirral home was then raided, leading to the discovery of 16 kilos of high purity cocaine hidden under a bed. The drugs were given a street value of £11 million. Perhaps more significant to police was the recovery of their mobile phones, which allowed officers to gain access to messages detailing gang member movements and mentioning helicopters. The discovery of those messages led Cleveland police to launch inquiries with air traffic control that matched potentially suspicious private helicopter flights with dates and times the gang had associates meeting in holiday homes beneath the scheduled routes. Another important breakthrough came through a chance arrest of one of Kennedy's pilots. April the 21st, 2016, just days after the 160 kilos of cocaine were dropped off in Dover, a helicopter pilot was arrested with a passenger as they landed at Red Hill Aerodrome. The flight, which was being traced by the NCA and other agencies, had dropped from radar near Yalding in Kent. There, another man had loaded his rented BMW with drugs from the helicopter before joining the M26, where he led cops on a 100-mile-per-hour chase. Inside his car were holdalls containing 43 kilos of cocaine, 60 kilos of heroin, and 30 encrypted phones. All three admitted conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. The pilot and his passenger, both Dutch, were each sentenced to 18 years and the courier to 16 years. That dropped connection with Kennedy's operation was unclear. The courier, when arrested, was found with a slip of paper in his pockets on which was the phone number of Russell Ford. When Cleveland police swooped on the gang, key men Kennedy and his pal Stewart were not in the UK. Stewart had fled to Thailand, where he met Kennedy while on bail for his role in a different cocaine supply conspiracy in Newcastle. He had been sentenced in his absence to 3 years in jail for that plot. In February 2019, the pair emerged when they were stopped in Eastern Europe while making an illegal river crossing from Moldova to Ukraine. Armed Ukrainian border soldiers stopped them near the Black Sea port of Odessa, and pictures showed them handcuffed and under guard. They were banned from the country for 5 years and returned to Moldova, which allowed for their extradition to the UK. So Kennedy's underworld connections were believed to be so significant that when he was brought back to the UK, he was remanded in HMP Frankland, dubbed Monster Mansion because it holds some of the nation's most notorious criminals. He was held there because detectives genuinely believed his criminal contacts were capable of a serious attempt to spring him from custody. In 2019, Kennedy watched via video link from Strangeways as he was jailed for 18 years and 4 months after admitting conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. Had he not pleaded guilty, a move that saw his sentence reduced by 1/3, Judge Sophie McCone told him he would have been jailed for 28 years. Stewart was sentenced to 13 years and 8 months. So the capture of Kennedy and Stewart was not the end of Operation Spoonbill, nor was it the end of the drama. Cleveland police identified the head of a Teeside drugs network supplied by Kennedy was Johnathon Moorby. Moorby fled the UK while awaiting trial in June 2014 after a huge haul of cocaine was found at his home in Stockton. He was found guilty of possessing cocaine and amphetamine with intent to supply in his absence and sentenced to 15 years. Rather than being in jail, he was hiding out in Thailand. However, police finally caught up with him in 2017 after tip-offs his son regularly travelled to see him and his associates were transferring him huge sums of cash. Armed officers swooped on his luxury villa in the holiday of Koh Samui, only to find Moorby had hired a speedboat and fled to remote Koh Mudsum. Police tracked him down, and the Mr. Big of the Northeast was pictured handcuffed, surrounded by cops and Interpol officers. The police charged Moorby with illegally entering Thailand and using a fake passport, and he was deported to the UK. He admitted conspiracy to supplying Class A drugs, and in May, Moorby was jailed for 14 years to be served consecutive to the 15 years he was sentenced to before he went on the run. Teeside Crown Court heard he had used his connections to Kennedy to secure quantities of Class A drugs for the Northeast from the Northwest, with Moorby running the operation on Teeside from Thailand. 6 more people were locked up for their role in the operation, and they were a mixture of couriers and minders who ran Moorby's scheme on the ground, with one tasked with meeting Kennedy's Merseyside couriers as they dropped off the drugs. So the conclusion of the case against those men mean almost 30 people have now been jailed over the plot run by Kennedy. They have been hit with a combined sentence in excess of 300 years. Following the sentence, Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Robinson of Cleveland Police said the court heard how these men worked together in an operation to supply Class A drugs. These individuals are linked to an importation group in the Northwest, which police have dealt with as part of Operation Spoonbill. The court heard how the individual activities as courier or storeman ensured wholesale drugs reached the streets of Teesside. Drugs cause misery in our communities, and we welcome these sentences which reflect the harm caused by these men as they selfishly pursued their own financial gain. So just going through the sentencing now, so Lance Kennedy, he was jailed for 18 years and 4 months. Robert Ferry Stewart, he was jailed for 13 years and 8 months. You got Paris Newcomb, he was jailed for 12 years and 8 months. J. Flip Flop Robinson, he was jailed for 14 years. Philip Smart, he was jailed for 14 years and 3 months. Connor Fraser Clark, he was jailed for 11 years and 4 months. Alison Fraser Clark, she was jailed for 8 years and 8 months. Matthew Payne, he was jailed for 11 years. David Campbell, jailed for 12 years. John Fraser, jailed for 10 years. Russell Ford, jailed for 7 years and 8 months. And Stephen Maddox was jailed for 4 years for acting as the gang's money launderer. So guys, absolutely crazy story there with regards to a drugs gang being jailed. Sounds something out of a movie, I'm telling you. Let me know what you guys think. It's your boy GT. Keep it locked, keep it real.